participant number go up quickly as people are being admitted. So I'll wait till that settles down. All right, so welcome everyone. Today's discussion on AI and politics. I'm hosted by the Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. I'm Bruce Schneier. I'm a security technologist. I teach here at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I just finished, as in I submitted it to my publisher yesterday, a book on AI and democracy. So I want to begin with a few announcements. I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll get into it. So first, the Ash Center acknowledges that the land at which Harvard University sits is traditional territory of the Massachusetts people. We also recognize the continuing presence of the neighboring Wampanoag and Nunpuk nations. Second, we're recording this session. So all of you who are attending will receive a link to that recording in email after the session. It'll be available on the Ash Center's YouTube channel. And this is intended to be interactive, so we're going to reserve a bunch of time at the end to respond to questions. You see that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. That is where you should submit your questions, and then I will select and hand them to the participants. So we're here to talk about ways that AI is already changing politics. We're not here to talk about deep fakes or propaganda. We're here to talk about the process of running for office and how that is being changed by AI, how AI will continue to change it. I have with me three panelists, each of which has a company that is working in some part of AI-assisted politics. So first, I have Aaron Berger. He's the co-founder, chief technology officer of a company called Donor Atlas, which uses AI to link politicians and donors. He is a former and future student of Harvard College. Second, Hilary Lair, who is the CEO of a company called Quiller. And Quiller uses AI to help candidates produce messaging in a variety of forms and ways. She is a Harvard Kennedy School MPA of this year. And finally, Roger Lin, who has founded a company called Legislate, which aids legislators in legislation. And he inexplicably has no Harvard affiliation at all, but we're still letting him in here. So that's our lineup, and I kind of want to start by asking all of you to briefly describe what your product does, how it uses AI, and kind of what your vision is. And I'll go down in alphabetical order and start with Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess to structure this, I think of Donor Atlas is how politicians are finding and doing research on donors. Once they decide what donors they want to reach out to, Hillary is going to talk to you about how Quiller is helping craft those messages and make that process much more seamless. And if that whole process goes well, then you've won your race, and Roger can talk to you about how to govern more efficiently. Donor Atlas helps political campaigns, and now we're expanding to nonprofits, find and research donors. For politicians, mostly that means what we call prospecting, which is the process of finding which donors you want to text and call and reach out to for donations. And so we use AI to make searching over 25 million donors in the United States easier, surfacing the right content, personalizing messaging, giving you insights about how you can reach people, stuff like that. We'll go into, sure, more detail later. But
do you think you're doing something that humans could do perfectly well, but there aren't just enough humans to go around? Or are you doing something different than a human fundraising assistant would do?
So I'd say there's two parts. There's, we use the advertising line that like our system is like 1,000 researchers working for you. So if you're a campaign and you have some campaigns have the resources to hire interns to research every single person giving to, Democratic races of a certain type in a certain area. You can do that, and some campaigns do. We have our models do that automatically. And then there's some things that wouldn't be possible at all, no matter how many humans you had, which are things like searching over that database very efficiently, mapping natural language to a certain database and allowing you to type in, donors who care about this issue and mapping it to 50,000 people who care about that issue. That would be basically impossible with humans. So I'd say there's two parts. Yeah.
Cool. All right, Hillary. So I'm going to turn to you. So tell us what problems do Quiller solve, and how does Quiller solve them?
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. I'm so happy to be here. So we launched Quiller in the summer of 2023 as the first to market generative AI tool, fine-tuned and designed specifically for political campaigns and organizations. So our tool is an LLM that's trained on thousands of pieces of hand-tagged content by and for political strategists and campaigners to locate the center of gravity of your content machine in one that's steeped in the political messages and values that campaigns need every day. In today's modern campaigning landscape, the demand for content is so high that a lot of campaigns simply can't keep up. So what the Quiller platform does is you come in, you get your own workspace, you train it on your talking points and writing samples, you put in your URL and teach Quiller about what your campaign's about, what your values are, and then instantly you can create unlimited drafts of fundraising emails, op-eds, petitions, volunteer scripts, digital ads, and a variety of other content types. So Quiller for a campaign, large or small, really focuses on the content home. It knows how you look and feel and sound as a candidate, and it can help you draft all the content that you need in a fraction of the time. So it might be a 90-minute process traditionally to start a fundraising email from a blank page. And in Quiller, you can have 10 drafts in 8 seconds, spend some time finalizing that draft and shipping it out in a matter of minutes instead of hours.
So I have two questions follow on. When you use the word drafts 4 times, I think that's interesting. So in your vision, the AI is not producing the final content, but it's kind of acting as a human script writer, a human copywriter, and is reading drafts. And you imagine that either the candidate or the campaign manager or somebody does the work to fix whatever the problems are, make it into final, and then approve it and then submit it.
Yeah, it's a good catch. And we designed that intentionally from the get-go, especially as the first to market tool. And I think we'll talk about this a lot about AI adoption in our space and some of the issues that come with that. But especially in these early years of AI, we believe very strongly that a human in the loop is absolutely essential before you have kind of direct AI to voter contact, right? And so our tool is very intentionally designed to be a resource for teams to save time in the drafting process. But that final proofread, approval, and shipping goes from a staff member.
Okay, and another question is, who is your ideal customer? Is it, I mean, when I think of you, I think of you more for state and local. If you're a congressperson, you have staff, you have writers. Are you mostly for the bigger races or for the smaller races?
We can really do a great service to both, but I think the greatest value for campaigns is going to be from those more local and down ballot races. They have to do the most with the least. And so a tool that can help them save time and drive efficiency, be more responsive, and augment their tiny teams, you're just going to see a much larger ROI. And we were able to measure that in a lot of our early use cases. But that said, for the larger, top of the ticket candidates, often they'll work with agencies to create and produce a lot of their digital copy. And so for those digital agencies that need to create a lot of content very quickly, there's also some value that can be realized there.
All right. Okay, so Roger, turning to you. All right, so legislate. This is
Yes.
really going to be interesting because you have a very specific type of writing. Right? Writing legislation is not like writing ad copy. It has to be legal. So talk to us about your system and what it does and what it doesn't do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a brief description, and I definitely can talk more in details about how we do it. So Legislate is an AI-powered suite of tools that streamlines research, drafting, and legal review, and currently designed for local governments. And we chose to focus on local governments first because local laws impacts our daily lives. And we were founded with the mission of elevating the standard of living across the United States by helping local governments establish more standardized core legislative processes, manage them more effectively on a daily basis, and making them more accessible and efficient for individuals of all backgrounds and expertise levels.
So it sounds like it's similar to Hillary that the local candidates they're the ones without staffs. They're the ones who just have no one to help. So I guess it's either you or lobbyists. Or are there even lobbyists at the local level?
Yeah, actually, interesting story. So legislature was actually started when I was helping a friend who was a city council at the time, and in her city council there was 11 council members and only one legislative staff that is able to draft legislation. So there's a huge short staff issue and resource constraints in most of the local governments around the United States. That meant 11 council members with ideas for a change were stuck waiting in line just for one person to draft their proposal. And there's a common saying at the local level saying that if a council member wants to get something done, they need to stay in office for at least 2 terms, or which is around 4 years to just see it through. And part of that is bureaucracy, obviously, but honestly, drafting a single piece of legislation can take up to 3 to 6 months, depending on the complexity. And this kind of slow progress isn't unique. It's happening all across the country. And most local governments are under-resourced, and many are able to pass 1 or 2 pieces of legislation a year. But oftentimes, they're hiring attorneys just trying to keep up with the compliance requirements from the state. And with federal grants shrinking, local governments are under even more pressure to do more with less. And that's why we saw the opportunity to help progress the legislative process and let advocacy groups, lobbyists, or even just residents that have no experience writing legislation to participate in the legislative process that impacts their daily lives.
All right, so when I think about AI doing human tasks, I tend to think of it improving in one of 4 dimensions, either speed, scale, scope, or sophistication. Right? Sometimes the AI doesn't have to be better, it just has to be faster. Sometimes we want better, better at reading a chest x-ray, or better at playing chess. Sometimes the scope of a chatbot that can do everything is what's important. So when I'm going to ask this sort of all of you, when you think about your particular use of AI, and 3 very different use cases, all critical, where do you think it outperforms humans? And where do you think there's still a ways to go before it outperforms humans? And I'm talking about sort of the present and the future. Kind of a complicated question, but Aaron will show us how to do it, and then it'll be easy.
Yeah, I would say for us, it's all about speed and scale. Paint a little picture. You're a local candidate, you want to run, you've never run for office before. Finding you discover within a few weeks that crap, I need $50,000 to actually make this work, and you have no idea where to get that money. Previously, the status quo was reach out to a consultant or email your friends in whatever party you affiliated with, and maybe they'll send you some people to reach out to. Our job is at Donor Atlas is you log into a platform and there's a big search bar and it's all about speed and efficiency. What that actually means with AI is that we can create 20 million profiles with biographies and wealth estimates and social connections and all that stuff way faster than you can do it manually. And also search we can do much faster, if that makes sense.
All right, Hillary, speed, scale, scope, sophistication. Where does Quiller fit in?
So we're a huge win on speed, right? Just the ability to whip out content so quickly and deploy it is a game changer, especially for down ballot candidates who might have an opportunity to draft talking points or volunteer recruitment email on the spot, whereas normally they just wouldn't have the capacity and they miss out on those opportunities. So speed, by and large, is huge. Scale, I think, is also tremendous. Like Aaron, we're moving into the nonprofit space, and both for campaigns, political orgs, and nonprofits, the ability to scale the operations and also to delegate empowerment to more local organizations or campaigns on the ground is huge, right? So the scale is massive here. The scope, I think, is also a place where AI is starting to win, right? We're able to, with content plus data, get to a level of content personalization, or at least the ability to iterate on content based on performance data that normally there's just not really the ability to do or to test in an everyday kind of manual process. So I think the scope of really opening up what we're able to create in a period of time is AI starting to kind of pull ahead a little bit, as long as it's utilized correctly and ethically, I'll say. And the last in sophistication, I think this, there's a piece of politics, as you said, Bruce, in a previous webinar, that there's a component of politics that is the most human of processes, and it's a very human process. I think part of what makes politics so human eternally is going to be the fact that it's about our lives and what we care about and our values, right? And those are very human things. And I think while AI can support and add scale and speed to our processes, it still has to land effectively with the end voter who reads that email or who hears that message. And the sophistication, the emotional nuance in that is always going to be that kind of human in the loop process to necessarily land at that level of sophistication in messaging and efficacy in messaging. So I think when used appropriately, sophistication is going to be something that comes from the human nuance and the emotional intelligence or the value intelligence. And it's going to be a tool set used by human campaigners to get their message across.
And so Roger, where does your tool fit in my taxonomy?
Yeah, we actually, this is going to be a long-winded answer because we actually help with all of the things that you just mentioned. So first I'll talk about speed. So I legislate in 2023, when we just had a very low fidelity product, we used AI to accelerate the legislative research and drafting process. And for example, it takes, as I mentioned, it took 3 to 6 months on average to draft legislation, depending on the complexity. However, we did the research and drafting without any legal background in just 4 days. And we were able to help lobbyists who have no experiences writing legislation to draft legislation. And we were able to help a county to draft a resolution with 45 minutes of turnaround. So, and through our experiences, that is the speed increase here. And maybe a lot of people doesn't know how a local legislation is written, but before even start writing, you have to do a lot of research. And that research, a big bulk of that research is actually going online to find ordinances that have already been written on that topic. And a lot of times staff
So by other jurisdictions.
Yes, by other jurisdictions that have already been passed. So, local governments are not very fond of creating something completely new from scratch, unless you're New York and you have a team of a lot of attorneys, right? But these staff attorneys will actually find ordinances that are written by calling neighboring cities and hey, are you guys working on any laws like that? Or they'll go to a form that has only keyword search, or the current legacy databases only allows keyword search. So it takes a very sophisticated person to do legal research. And actually, a lot of them use Google as the sole source to find ordinances. And this is a very ineffective process, in my opinion. And so what we've actually just recently launched was Ordinance Hub, which is which aggregates all the ordinances available online into a unified searchable platform. And we use AI to enable content-based search and generate clear summaries for each ordinances, which significantly reduces research and time and making policy information far more accessible. And this tool is completely free for everyone to access, what we want to do is to establish a new industry norm, but democratize policy research.
That's super interesting. I think a lot about AI and trust and what has to be done for AI to be trusted. And what's interesting about all three of you is that the trust barrier, even though these are affecting democracy, the trust barrier is lower than some applications. You imagine an AI being used, which it has been, to make bail and parole decisions, or to help with a judge make a legal reason, or maybe to do benefits administration in a bureaucracy. Those AIs have to be trusted by society. We all have to trust the AI that is making a benefits decision that will affect all of us. But for all three of you, the AI is being used by an individual. And the trust really is with the individual. You all have tools for a person. And the only person who has to trust that AI is the person using it. So me as a voter, as a constituent, I'm going to trust the candidate or the legislator. And what their tools are kind of isn't my business. I trust them and I'm trusting their decisions. But as these things move into sort of more democratic applications, the trust changes. So I guess I want to ask you, and I guess you all, uh, how you how your customers have come to trust you, sort of whether they do. Is there anything you're doing to make that trust work? Your customer is a candidate, is an elected official. Why are they trusting you, and how they come to trust you? And again, I'll go down and start with Aaron.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think we, Donor Atlas, use AI in a very different way than most other companies, and in a different way than Quiller and Legislate do. We do almost no, call it generative content, where like the content is being produced and shown directly to the user. We use AI almost exclusively for, we call them small logic problems. And all of our engineering is about finding what these small logic problems are. I'll give you an example of a small logic problem is like, what does somebody mean when they search for donors in California who care about the arts, whatever. Tiny logic problem, we need to map that to our database. Another logic problem is, there are 7 people who come up when you search for Bruce Schneier on Google. Which one is the one I'm talking about, right? Like our general rule is that any problem a 6 to 8-year-old child could do, we're willing to trust an AI to do. And we impose a lot of constraints, like making sure large language models that we use cite their sources and reference internally the things we're giving them and stuff like that. So our users trust it because when you hover over anything on Donor Atlas, you see the source, right? It takes you to a URL. And so there's sort of UX and UI things we do to display that trust, if that makes sense.
All right. So Hillary, why do people trust you?
I would say people trust us because we've earned it. We've really put in the work to help bring the space along with us, right? As you mentioned earlier, there's so much concern about deepfakes and such almost an over focus on deepfakes as soon as AI and politics comes up. There's a lot of doom and gloom in the media, particularly leading into the 2024 election cycle, that honestly put quite a chill in the air for a lot of practitioners who were concerned about blowback, or that they would do something wrong or make a mistake, or that it would be, something that they had to fight against. And so there's quite a bit of resistance amongst a lot of practitioners in the space when we first introduced the tool in summer of 23. What we did is worked very closely shoulder to shoulder with partners across the space on thought leadership. So really investing in training and customer success and working very closely with our early partners to iterate on the product roadmap in a way that would help the users both understand the technology and feel comfortable and empowered using it. So we really invested, even over invested in training, just sitting side by side with our customers to make sure that they understood and felt empowered about the tool set. And it also meant understanding the transformation of people's workday that would really exist as a result of using these tool sets, and helping people understand where to put it in their workday, what to expect out of it, and really to understand what's different in copy editing AI drafted content versus human drafted content, because the types of mistakes and errors that you're looking for are quite different. And it's a new type of cognitive process, a new type of copy editing that people need to really train for and get comfortable with. The second thing I'll say is that a lot of concerns about job security were very prevalent in our space and others. And so making sure that we would work with teams and managers to be prepared to have conversations and make commitments to not replace jobs with AI tools, but to really integrate them as tool sets and make those commitments to their teams were huge for trust and utilization. And the other thing is transparency around our LLM selection process. So we decided, especially with so many changes in terms of use that are kind of floating around for all the major LLMs in the space, we wanted to be LLM agnostic, so we didn't paint ourselves into a corner. And we set up a rubric for data, privacy, security, data ownership, right? So that you own the content that you add or create in the platform, and that it's not used to train any models without your permission, and also bias mitigation. So we had this transparent rubric that we would utilize for selection of any LLMs. any LLMs that met that bar, we would then train on our fine-tuned model and then test the quality of output to make sure that whatever we were using, so long as it fit our requirements, produced really good copy that people liked and that they could work with. And that was, again, I think the last piece of really building trust is that people liked the content that the model was putting out, and we were continuing to refine the product to help make it easier, faster, and more magical for users to utilize this in their workday.
And so I want to point out something that Hillary said that I think is really important, that AIs make different sorts of mistakes than humans. Because if you think about it, we as society are really good at dealing with human sorts of mistakes. We have, oh, I don't know, double entry bookkeeping. We have checklists of surgical implements to make sure none have been left in a body after surgery. We have copy editors. You know, we are really good at dealing with the sorts of mistakes humans make. If AIs make human-like mistakes, it's going to be easy. But Hillary's right when she said that AIs make different sorts of mistakes. So a lot of our mistake correction systems don't really work right, and we're going to need new ones to deal with the sorts of mistakes that AI makes. All right, so Roger, back to you. You're in a sense, you have a harder problem than Hillary does because writing, copy for a fundraising email is one thing, but writing legislation that has to fit within the existing body of legislation, maybe refer to other laws. I'm going to be worried about loopholes and did I make a typo or there have been legislations that have been decided what they mean based on a comma, right? That was President Obama's healthcare law. Uh, it's going to be harder for you. How do you establish trust?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, first, I think legislate has been stamped, oh, we write laws. No, we create a suite of tools to streamline the entire research, drafting, compliance process. And each of those steps, we have multiple verification processes to verify if it's actually good. And so what we want to really emphasize as legislators is that we don't replace human judgment. We actually just assist. So the person that is drafting the legislation, drafting a resolution, all we do is we retrieve the relevant information that is available to you, like the state law, the local law, and the other relevant ordinances that we have that's similar to the topic that you're writing. And as a legal staff or attorney, they have to be the one verifying the sources. So because when it goes to the council and be reviewed, it's under your name. We're just a tool to accelerate that process. And that's one way that we're increasing trust. However, because writing legislation is such an intricate process, and it needs people that knows the process to facilitate it. At least for now, right now we're establishing our credibility as a company to make free tools to make ineffective processes better. And we work closely with our design partners and have advisors who spent decades in the public sector to really make products that people want. And so, and on top of that, what we want to focus on is not just pushing the frontier of writing law, because lawmaking is a very intricate process that involves enforcement, execution, co-compliance. So what we're focusing on is actually improving existing processes currently. So one thing that stood out to me as in the last 2 years I've been working on legislate was compliance. So whenever state have to update their code after their legislative session, every single municipality in the state is supposed to update their municipal code as well. What I found out was that that is such a time-consuming process that a lot of local government don't do it. So oftentimes you have cities that just kind of hear it from lobbyists. Hey, this change, you probably should update this section. So there was no comprehensive process to do that. The process of just reading through municipal code and comparing with state code, which is tens of thousands of pages, takes around 300 to 500 hours just to do it comprehensively. It's physically almost impossible to do and very expensive to do that. And we are able to streamline that process in a very, very short time and save a ton of money for local government that wants to stay compliant.
Interesting. So I'm kind of get it wrong. I mean, there's a county in California that had to eliminate racial covenants from its various real estate transactions things, and it was something that's estimated it would take man years to do, and AI was programmed to do it in hours, and the false positives were very low. Really interesting example of using AI to kind of do a boring, repetitive process and do it well in a way that helps everybody. This is an important thing about AI in general. I'm going to talk to the whole audience. These AI systems tend to be best at doing things that have to be done a lot of times, but slightly differently each time. That is kind of the sweet spot for AI right now. If it's a repetitive process, just build a machine to do it. If it's going to be completely different every time, you need a human being. But if it's like mostly the same but slightly different, AI can do well. I want to ask about a couple things, but really in the general theme of power. When I think about AI augmenting humans, there's sort of two ways this can go. So AI-assisted customer service agents. The AI tends to make the average agent better, but doesn't do much to improve the service of performance of the best agents. So it improves the average, but doesn't really do much for the best. An AI-assisted programmer, the better programmer you are, the better you can use the AI to become an even better programmer. So it makes the best even better. Now, I'm going to ask you each for your product, where do you think you fit in that? Right? Are you going to raise the average of everybody, or are you just going to make the best better? So, in a sense, are you going to make the activity more democratic, or are you going to increase the power differential? Aaron, you're first.
Yeah, I would say we definitely focus on making the best better, although I'd say we want to make the people who want to be the best better. I think I saw a couple of people submitted QA or chat about this. Political fundraising right now is a lot of spam texting and whatnot. I would consider those people who are like not the best at fundraising, but they're doing the thing that is the highest ROI, which is without good data. Like that's the best thing you can do is just text 100,000 people, and the ROI is positive, and you keep doing that over and over because you don't have enough good data to reach out to the right people. Good fundraisers reach out to a few of the really right people and build relationships with them and sell them on the mission and fit into their idea of what they want to make about the world. And so our tool lets you significantly easier and faster find the right people and know what to talk to them about so you can cut down on that process. So I'd say we make good fundraisers. We say fundraisers who do their homework. We make their jobs much easier. But if you're a fundraiser who wants to text 1 million people, we're not really going to help with that much. Yeah.
So in some ways, the better you are, the better you can use your tool.
Right. I mean, you don't need to know a lot of details about someone to send them a text that says the world is about to fall apart unless you donate $5. You don't really, more data doesn't really help with that.
Will that actually help? Because I would totally donate $5 if it would.
I'm sure you get a lot of those texts every day. The question is, will you donate $5 to all of them?
Oh, I unsubscribe as soon as possible. I'm not going to lie.
Exactly.
Hillary, so where are you in the, right, increasing the differential or collapsing it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the sentiments that Aaron just raised, and it's an interesting question that you're asking, given this political moment, because I think we and Bruce and I have talked about this a little bit. We don't really consider the end voters' experience very often. So, what does it feel like to get all of those? And this is we as a space. How does it feel to get all those text messages and all of this kind of one-way communication when the strength in social movements and political movements is always through shared relationships that are built around these, shared values, right? And how do you preserve those at the scale and frequency of messaging in today's modern high-volume world? And when you look at building AI tools to increase the efficiency and speed of those processes, you're kind of at a crossroads here, right? The crossroads is, do we build tools that expand on our existing tactics, or do we build tools that surface new possibilities and new approaches that are finally within reach because technology makes it more accessible? And ultimately, it's a human decision about the practitioners and the political practitioners and how they deploy these tool sets for that kind of choice that needs to be made. Do we keep going with our existing tactics, or can we open up new possibilities here? And what I will say is for the status quo, especially for the major advantage that Quiller can give those local candidates who, again, have to do the most with the least and have such scarce resources and are running these wonderful campaigns in every state across this great country. These candidates deserve access to tools. They deserve to be able to run for office and to be able to do that in a way that they can afford, right? So lowering the playing field, removing barriers to entry. AI tools can be tremendous with that. So in that way, it's really that agent function. They're making it easier to do what they've always done for most people. And then your top of the ticket candidates will always kind of have their own things that they do or tools that they build in house. But I do think that there's also some new ways that AI can help us reflect as practitioners and really kind of ask ourselves at a higher level, are we able to incorporate performance data at a meta level to understand when we need to change course on our tactics because the long-term effects aren't working? So there's a little bit of that programmer path where we can actually, choose a new adventure in some of these pathways. And I'm really excited to see how it plays out.
All right, so Roger, so let's assume that everybody, the legislator, is using your tool. Is everybody better? Or is like the best so much better now? I mean, because politics is going to be a lot of give and take and debate and argument.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really can't take away the bureaucratic process, the public discussions. For every single ordinances that they pass, they are required to have public input sessions. So, and I think it's not really about making council members better or making local governments better at writing legislation. It's more about getting rid of things that are on their plate faster. Because at the end of the day, what AI does is just strengthening everyone's ability to access legal information and to draft these legislative documents. So what Legislate does, it definitely lowers the barrier to entry to legislative processes. When we work with the advocacy group, they were very familiar with the municipal code in the city of Denver. However, they don't know how to draft one. They don't even know where to start. So when they are going to the council member connection, they really just give a notepad and say, hey, like, we want this to be done. Can you do it? Instead, with our help, they were able to submit a full legislation. So that really democratized the entire legislative process. And for city attorneys that are using this tool, what they do is they have a ton of things they have to do. They have to review documents. They have to make sure that we're compliant. They have to litigate. So they have a lot of things on hand. But with Legislate, they could do better compliance review. They can draft better. They could do research faster, and they have more time to use the context they have ingested while spending decades working at a city, and make this legislation more and more considerate for all the residents in the city. So I think it's a good thing for everyone, in my opinion.
All right, so I want to remind everybody that if you have questions, please type them in the Q&A. I'm looking through them and I'm kind of incorporating questions into the conversation. So please continue to do that, and that is useful for me and for all of us. Kind of want to ask about, I don't know, the morality here. And right, there's always debates about what we lose as humans when we delegate things to machines, right? And this debate has been as old as writing and literacy, that young people can't memorize the great ballads anymore. They just write them down and they become stupid because of it. And like you'll see this in ancient Rome, and every technological advancement comes with this. So where do you see? I mean, is there any red lines that I don't want my program to do this at all? This has to be human. I'm okay if this happens. So where do you look at morality and the central humanness of democracy? I mean, democracy involves people, and it doesn't work without people. This is not, I mean, none of you are making the machine that will make all the decisions so we can just not pay attention anymore and the benevolent AI will figure out policy for all of us. Or otherwise, I wouldn't have had you on this in this discussion. But sort of where do you see the moral implications, either whether you're thinking or other people have talked to you as they hear about what you're doing? Aaron, you're always first.
Difficult question. Maybe it shouldn't be. Yeah, I mean, we've stayed away from generative content. And this is where we and Quill are sort of paired together because that's their value proposition, and we sort of funnel people to that process, if that makes sense.
Right. You
We're
figure out who to
worried.
talk to, she figures out what to tell them.
Yes, exactly. So we're worried about that because for the same reason, I'm sure Hillary has invested so much into trust and whatnot, because it's worrying to have to tell people this is what you should say to someone, and so we focus on just the data. There is a morality piece of our business, which is how we handle the data that we input, right? The data that we take in and generate the profiles. That's a whole separate discussion about use of public data. Is it bad because it's a ton of public data that people wouldn't have been able to ingest otherwise, or is it great because people use that public data now? It just takes them a lot longer, and at the end of the day, we're trying to make the world a better place by allowing politicians, by democratizing access to capital and allowing politicians to actually do the things they want to do. So, and I'm sure that's the case for all three of us, is like using tons of public data that was not ingestible before, but wink, wink, like we're using it for the right purpose, so it's fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Hillary. Where are you? You might say you're a little harder. How do you think about this?
Yeah, I think part of it is regardless of the startup that you build, you're going to want to build in a really good terms of service, be very thoughtful about how you build the team, what clients you work with and don't work with, and how you have a code of conduct that's built into the usage of the product, right? Because we can say we've designed something for these ethical use cases, but if we allow anybody into the platform and they use it to create misinformation, right, we need a code of conduct or a terms of service that we can enforce to maintain appropriate use of the platform. So we put a lot of thinking into that when we first built it. And the line that we set was not using AI to create mis or disinformation, and, intentionally misleading known falsehoods. I do think that that is challenging at a philosophical level in today's post-truth era, when we have such extreme polarization and disagreement about what truth is, and who is granted the authority to dictate what it is extremely controversial. And so I think this is something that we're grappling with across the board and across the aisle. I'm on the American Association of Political Consultants AI and Emerging Tech Committee, and we put out an initial statement about use of AI in political campaigns, which is basically don't use it to create misinformation. But now our committee is going through a process to really articulate and define what that is, what appropriate use cases are, because on the other side, we're also seeing out of fear state legislators try to shut down really benign use cases in an industry that's changing very quickly. So you also don't want to prohibit use of ethical or appropriate use cases. And you also don't want to, out of fear, cede the advantage to bad actors, right? If there's really great school board candidates or city council candidates, the real lifeblood of this country and what makes democracy work, we don't want to take away access to these tools because of what might happen when bad actors are certainly not going to adhere to a lot of those rules of the road anyway. So there's a lot of different competing viewpoints that need to be balanced here when it comes to the ethical use case. But for us, it really starts with articulating our values and working with partners that match that.
As long as I have you, I have two questions from the audience, and so it's quick. One asked about, do you adapt message content to reflect what's known about the recipient? Which is a more general question, I think. Are you doing only mass messages, or do you do personalized individual messages?
Yeah, so I see this as a four-part process. The first one is customized content generation. So you train Quiller on your talking points and writing samples, and you can create a ton of drafts that match your style for the communication that you send in emails or texts or op-eds. The second is API-based integrations that allow you to actually generate that content directly inside of the CRMs or tool sets that you're using to send those messages. Phase 3 is that the content that is outputted is shaped by the performance data associated with the info that you have in the CRM, right? Because you need to be plugged into the CRM toolset to look at the performance data and adapt the outputs of your model. That has to happen inside of a CRM or another tool set. I think stage 4, and we're not here yet, but I do think that to a large extent this is where this is going, is individual level content personalization. So I'm
You don't do that yet.
No, not yet. But we are very soon going to announce some really exciting API partnerships with CRMs that are going to allow us to approach that in the near future. And I think we'll all have to learn together, does individual level content personalization work, right? Is it more effective to tailor each message to each person? Or is there something human and valuable about everybody getting the same message because you feel like you're part of something greater? I think none of us know that yet, but we'll find out pretty soon.
All right, so Roger, where are you on this red line ethics?
Yeah, I think it sounds tricky. It sounds like a tricky question to us.
I don't mean it to be, but these are hard things to think about. So it's less tricky and more thoughtful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Hillary and Aaron made a lot of logical statements on this topic. And from legislative side, I think formatting and making the language that you put in sound like a legal language and retrieving information, these shouldn't be moral issues. These are just efficiency issues, and that's what we do. We want to focus on duplicating the current processes, and the moral issue really comes in during the discussion process in the city council. Hey, like, should we pass this local law? Who is this going to who is this local law going to impact? What kind of businesses is going to benefit or get harmed from this? These are the discussions that I think AI is not ready to make these decisions for people yet. Maybe 5, 10 years down the line when we have a lot of trust in AI. But right now, I think we're still at a level where AI could help suggest helpful information, maybe point out things that humans are not thinking about. But AI is only a tool. This is our angle at this.
So Roger, as a question for you in the Q&A, I want to quickly ask you, when you draft legislation, you're relying on previous legislation as a model to look at. And the question you're asking is a good question. Do you account or mitigate bias in existing laws that are racially biased, gender biased, geographically biased? Do you deal with that, or is that something you leave to the humans?
Absolutely, we do deal with that, but obviously adjusting the model to be non-biased is actually biased and just in another form. So what we do is actually when we draft legislation, we try to take legislations that are more recent, and another point that we do to improve biases is importing more data. More data reduces biases. It's just a date. Yeah, that's the answer.
Yeah, that is interesting. There's several questions on sort of who your customers are. So I'm going to put into one, and we go through this quickly. It's sort of a very practical question. Do you work with both parties, or do you work with just one party? Are there groups for whom, if they wanted to be your customer, you would say, not a chance, I'm not selling to you? And sort of where do you fall on the politics line? Are you a tool for everybody? So, Aaron?
Yes. So we have done some weaving on this. We started as just for Democrats running for office. We've relaxed that constraint to a set of guiding principles, which generally fall along party lines, but we are very open about we're willing to work with both parties, and I think that's important for us because again, it's a form of bias to sort of not be willing to do that. Our guiding principles are pretty strict, though. We don't work with candidates that don't support a woman's right to choose or support organizations that make it significantly easier to get assault rifles or no background checks. So they're very happy to. I don't have the link ready, but I can talk with anyone after about what guiding principles we use. So we're non-partisan, but have a strict set of guiding principles. And there are definitely organizations that we have said, absolutely not, we're not going to work with you because you violate this guiding principle. Yeah.
Right. Hillary, where are you on this?
So this is an interesting thing that I want folks to know about the political tech ecosystem is to a large extent, the market demands that folks generally choose a side, and that can either fall along party lines or value lines. But the larger trajectory of the political tech space, at least as I've seen it over the past 15 years, there's a lot of demand often from customers that the tool sets that they utilize are not shared by both. by both sides of the aisle. And part of that is strategic. Part of that is also for just utilization. People don't want to share, product feedback and feature feedback for tools that can then be used against them. So there's a lot of interesting dialogue in that space. And I think it's also in a highly polarized climate, much more likely to happen in countries that are highly polarized than in perhaps, healthier, more vibrant democracies or multi-party democracies. So it also depends on where your customers are and who your customers are. Quiller works with Democratic candidates and value-aligned nonprofit organizations.
Right. So Roger, where are you on this?
We will make this tool available for all parties.
All right. So this is a legislative assistive tool. Quickly, geographical limitations. U.S. only? U.S., Europe, the world? Aaron, where are your customers right now?
Our customers are where our donors are, and our donors are only from the United States, just because of every country has different ways of reporting contributions and mortgage data and all this stuff that's public. We don't have the engineering efforts right now. We would love to do it, and we're planning on it, but save it for next year. So we're only
Hillary, where are you in the geographical limitations?
We're predominantly in the US, but we've run a couple of pilots internationally with great success. We've also found a lot more openness to utilize AI tools in other countries than we saw in a lot of places in the US, especially in late 2023 going into 2024. That's changed a lot, but we're primarily based in the US.
Want to name some other countries, or are they still secret for now?
I'll just kind of out of respect.
It's okay. No pressure.
The last thing that I'll just say is that a lot of it also depends on monitoring global policy around AI utilization because it's actually restricted for our use case, like in the EU, for example.
So Roger, for you, I also had a question. I mean, U.S. law is kind of its own thing. And I know that France has an AI model trained on French law for French legislators. So you have competition, at least in France. I know that.
Yeah, I think a lot of local governments a lot of governments around the country is thinking about building their internal tools just because legislation and laws are such an intricate topic to, have another country's company to work on it. I'm American myself, so I'm focusing on the American market. However, in the last 2 years, we've gotten inquiries from Africa, Asia, France, Canada, to help rebuild their legislative system with AI. However, we are only focusing on America right now.
Right. So we all know that the great majority of human beings living under a democracy do not live in the United States. Right? The majority democracy citizens are in other countries. I want to highlight something that Roger said a couple of times ago, where he said that not having a bias is a bias. That's actually very important. The flip side of bias are values. Like I might want the AI to have a bias towards fairness or kindness or accuracy, right? These are biases. They're biases we want, so we tend not to use the word bias because that's a negative term. But the notion of an unbiased AI doesn't exist. Right? Because all of the decisions, all of the predictions, all of the things the AI has to do are based on some set of data, which is going to bubble up some sorts of bias or values. So the question is not, is it unbiased, but is it biased the way you want? And what's interesting to me about these three applications, what I said early on, all that needs to happen is for the person using it to say, those are my biases, those are my values. Now you can imagine an extremely biased politician I want an AI that reflects my biases, just like a judge today hires a law clerk that reflects their biases. You don't want a human law clerk that doesn't. So when you choose an AI writing assistant or any AI assistant for doing anything, you want it to reflect your biases, your values. It's sort of interesting. I think in Aaron's application, accuracy matters a lot. So, I kind of don't want to be biased. I want it to be right. I mean, I want it to get the right answer. I want to get the most contributions for my for my effort. I have a quick question for you, Aaron, from the audience. Then I'm going to go to closing questions. Someone asked, is isn't this just one another more step in an arms race? Like if everyone has your product, then we're back where we started from, and no one got any better. So I want a quick answer to that.
Yeah, I would say like right now we're in an arms race of bad data. As I mentioned before, like this is mostly true in politics because in the nonprofit space, you're around for 20 years, 40 years. And so it's worth it to establish a 12, 18-month relationship with a donor to steward a six-figure donation. In politics, my race is ending in 7 months. If I don't raise enough in 5 months, I'm going to lose. And I don't have enough time to get the data. So right now we're in an arms race of just like who can text the most people and get the most money because texting is so cheap that it actually is positive ROI to just text people. I think in an optimal world where we Donor Atlas want to be is if every campaign had Donor Atlas, they would only need to reach 15, 20, 25 people to get the money they need to win their race. And you would only get one phone call from a friend who says, I'm supporting this candidate. They asked me to reach out. They're doing incredible things. I think you would really agree with what they're doing. That's where we want to be. So I think it's an arms race in the correct direction, which is towards everybody having the best data and not needing to do what we call bad fundraising.
Okay, don't go away because you're going to be the first to answer my last question. So very quickly, only have 5 minutes left. Where are you going? What's next? And again, very quickly.
What's next for us? I mean, we're new.
You're all new.
Well, I'm not yet one academic year out of Harvard, which is why Bruce said I was former and future. So for my parents' sake, I'll be returning at some point to get my degree. But we're moving in the direction of better and more trustable data. So you were mentioning bias earlier. We're working on models to predict giving capacity and how much to ask someone. And those are models that definitely can have bias. People of a certain socioeconomic status, it might predict has more capacity to give. That's what we're working on right now is more trust in the data and more setting our sources and the same things we've been doing, but to a more granular extent. Yeah.
All right, Hillary, what's next?
I think continuing to grow out our best practices and use cases as much as we can work together to bring great candidates and organizations together to set the use cases, value sets, and appropriate uses of AI, the more we can hold the bar to define what the bar is and hold bad actors accountable. That's our best chance to push back against misinformation without ceding the advantages to other folks who have less scrupulous morals or values. And I think we shouldn't not take advantage of new technology if it can help strengthen democracy, lowercase democracy. And I just love being part of that solution. I also think that there's so much to learn here and to allow ourselves to also see AI not only as a tool, but as a mirror, right? So what is it reflecting back to us that's making us reflect on how we conduct politics as usual? And do we have opportunities to transform using technology so that it's a more holistic, fulfilling process and a healthier democracy overall? I think sometimes we see ChatGPT mirror healthier examples of active listening or helping us to identify our own biases in a lot of our own conversations. So maybe there's a chance that AI can actually help us find new frames, new ways of talking about things, and new ways of building coalitions and finding consensus or inspiration that help get us unstuck in our polarized moment.
Roger, what's on your roadmap?
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time building evaluation, building products, and building free tools for local governments. And what our next step is to partner up with organizations that have resources to distribute those tools out to local governments. And also, we're fundraising, and we are partnering up with more type of organizations like law firms, state leagues to distribute this tool to as many local governments' hands as possible.
All right, so I want to thank you all. This has been a great conversation. Thanks those who stuck around for the end. Thank you for your questions. So we has Aaron Berger from Donor Atlas, Hillary Lair from Quiller, Roger Lin from Legislate. Ask for those companies by name. I'm Bruce Schneier. I'm going to plug my book, Rewiring Democracy, MIT Press in October, which looks at the entire democratic system from campaigning to administration to the legal system and citizens and how AI will make a difference, positive and negative. I'm mostly optimistic, which means no one's going to want to read the book come October, but we can always hope. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the Ash Center, for hosting. Again, the recording will be on the Ash Center YouTube channel, probably within seconds. This is the internet era. And